saying, what do I bet? Where do I place my money on? Do I place my money on the fact that this fiat system with printing, trillions of dollars of new deficits a year is going to survive? Is going to survive another 10 or 20 years? Or do I think that this better form of money that was invented by Satoshi and sort of, it was thought about for at least 10 years before Satoshi, from Nick Szabo to Wei Dai to Al Finney, and then the proof of work stuff from Cynthia Dwork and Adam Back before that led to that. But this better form of money, do we think that that's going to dominate? And in my opinion, it's very simple. It's like this inflation stuff is going to it might get better. It might get better over the next, year, maybe 2 years, but it's ultimately going to get much worse. And, Bitcoin is not pricing today's inflation or tomorrow's inflation. It's pricing long-term inflation. The problem is, even if inflation is good for the next 2 years, it's very unlikely that it's going to be good for the next decade. You can debate how much they can kick the can down the road, and you can say until you're blue in the face, they can kick the can down the road. They have infinite ability. They don't have infinite ability to kick the can down the road. And the thing that's going to give out is inflation. And we saw a little taste of that 2 years ago. And the reality is your money doesn't buy you. Your money buys you somewhere between 25% and let's call it 40% of its value as it used to before the pandemic. That's just a fact. And if we start pushing money printing to the next level, your money's going to be worth half as much as it is in 5 years. It will be worth in 2 decades. It'll be worth 10%. It'll be worth 10%. So, Lauren Huddle, I agree with you, Fred. Yeah, it's a fact. And it's a fact also that if you look at gold price fiat has lost 87% of its value to gold over the last 20 years. That you don't think of gold as like doing that well, but the reality is fiat gold prices have gone up 8 times in the last 20 years. And this tells you that doesn't mean that inflation has gone up 8 times, but long-term expectations of inflation have gone up 8 times. Okay. And I think this is only going to continue. So the problem is, you're in turbulence and you better attach your seatbelts, right? And you better grab something that's solid, because everything that's not solid, the value of it will go to zero pretty faster than you can think, right? And if you're dealing with government paper that's paying you 5%, 6% interest, it just doesn't matter to me what these people say about liquidity, about these contraptions like BTFD and stuff. They just don't matter, because ultimately the government is absolutely going to debase your currency, and you can hold anything you want, but you cannot hold government currency. It just will not work right now. It's not a valid way to hold your money. Now you could debate whether stocks is an okay way. I actually don't think it's going to. I think it's a very substandard way of holding your money right now. I don't see anything that has the long-term, anywhere near the long-term track record of Bitcoin right now. And I think right now is, it was interesting on the panel, it was very clear that I was the only person on that panel who was all in. Everybody else was like hedging their bets. Cash is not a bad place to hang out. With the exception of Bill, who I know is pretty hardcore Bitcoiner. But I would be surprised if Bill has more than 20% of his net worth in Bitcoin, which is a lot for most people. But I just think people are ignoring the magnitude of what the tsunami that is about to hit in the next 5 to 10 years. And I don't want to sound like Peter Schiff or an alarmist. But I actually think we're, I think this is going to get far worse than anybody thinks. And I gave this anecdote about when I was in Argentina. I had to look up the date because um, it was a while ago. It was in 2015. Okay, it was in November of 2015. I went to Argentina. I had a public company at that point, Minds and Machines, was listed in the London AIM market, and we hosted this big party in Argentina. And everybody at this party thought that finally Argentina had gotten inflation under control. Like the bad part of that whole wave of inflation, that was done. Now we had this new Argentina. It was going to be great. And so, you can get deluded into thinking that everything's great, but 3 years later they were having 100% inflation, right? And they're still having pretty severe inflation today, even though they have this new guy, Millet, in charge. So I definitely think 4 years is a long time in this kind of world. I think a lot can happen. I think regardless of who's in, I really do think it's a political thing, right? So I think both parties are going to be terrible, right? So I think that if you have Biden, you're going to have the worst sort of economic theory ever in the United States that's being applied. I completely agree with Stanley Druckenmiller when he said on CNBC, somebody said, "How would you rate the Biden administration for economics?" And he said, "I would rate it an F." And I agree. It is the worst idea ever. It is literally, he is pushing socialistic ideas that completely failed in Europe, right? He's pushing enormous amounts of new spending and on stuff like the Green New Deal. He's talking to lunatics, and I use the word very carefully, lunatics, like Stephanie Kelton and these MMT people. And, they're capable in not that long of actually destroying everything that the last 250 years built up in America, right? So they're very capable of doing that. So the Biden side is it's just going to be a disaster. We know it's going to be a disaster. The last 3 years have not been that bad, right? But we've kind of got ourselves out of COVID. It was okay. But this next 4 years are going to probably be just horrible under Biden. So that's bad. And then on the other hand, under Trump, well, we know that we're going to be like cutting taxes, cutting interest rates down to zero. It's probably better for crypto, it's better for Bitcoin. But, the deficits under Trump are going to be astronomically bad too. So I think if you look at both of these last two presidential terms, Trump and Biden, they're the only terms where you got up to, $2 trillion deficits. That's the only time in the history of the United States we've gotten there. And it was at least twice as bad as anything before that. So maybe 3 times as bad as Obama, which wasn't good either, right? So we're getting worse and worse and worse in terms of deficits. And, if you don't think this leads to inflation, you think that you can say this is not money and they're not creating inflation, blah, blah. You're deluding yourself. You're wrong. Like, this is going to create massive inflation. And you're going to first notice that because anything that you want to buy that sort of long-term that could withstand inflation, like a house, is going to go up in price. And you're seeing that right now, right? So even with these kind of super high mortgages, you'll see housing prices, they're not going down. And why are they not going down? Because first of all, nobody can afford to move. Nobody can afford to buy a new house. But if you do have a new house, if you have a house that you're going to live in, you're certainly not selling it and renting, because renting right now could be this complete and since nice to see you, since definitely you rent and all of a sudden you could see your rent payments double, triple over the next 10 years, and I remember very much in the 80s in New York, and it was just, people were just struggling in order just to make these rents, because, even though interest rates were really high and mortgage rates were really high, you just couldn't afford to, the idea of renting, you were just caught in this trap. And so I think, we're going to be in the situation where, you better have all your money in hard assets, 100%. Now, it could be in Bitcoin, it could be in real estate, it could be in gold, it could be in top stocks, S&P 500. But you better not play around with bonds. You better not play around with cash. Those are not good places to put your money right now. And being defensive is not good. You got to be offensive towards inflation. And so that's kind of my viewpoint right now. I really think we're in a very dangerous position with respect to the economy, whether we're talking Biden or Trump. I'm not even sure which one I hate more, because I hate them both. I really think they're both going to be terrible. I think if RFK had any kind of a shot, I would vote for RFK over the two of them. I don't think he has a shot, but I may still vote for him just as a protest vote. But look, we're screwed. Inflation, as Since says, it's a mathematical certainty. So I think we got to look at, what does that mean? That means we have to be in Bitcoin, right? We have to be in Bitcoin. If you want to be in gold, fine, be in gold. Probably not as a good place to be as Bitcoin. We know that the power law that we all track and love for Bitcoin, it also applies for Bitcoin versus gold, right? So Bitcoin's eating gold's lunch. And so, if you want to have some in gold, that's okay. You probably are going to do okay relative to purchasing power of everything else. So it's not the worst, but probably going to underperform Bitcoin. Will we have pullbacks? Yeah, we're going to have some pretty nasty pullbacks. We're definitely not seeing the end of kind of these pullbacks. I personally think we're going to go higher before we pull back the next. I think we're kind of at the level for now of this particular pullback, but do I know for sure? No, I don't know. Do I care? Not really, because I just don't see any alternative right now other than to be close to fully invested, whatever that means for you in Bitcoin. I think you got to be pretty close to fully invested here. And in terms of the drivers long term right now, because I was at an event, I was invited to this kind of pretty elite event in Los Angeles last night. That's sort of connected to the Michael Milken conference here. And, everybody's sort of talking about Bitcoin volatility and how that's bad. And I'm like, look, you really can't, you have to live with it. It comes with the territory. And do I think that we could be down 20% in a month? Very easily. It's very possible, right? But you can't optimize for that, and you can't try to trade around that. You can't be too cute. None of that stuff's going to work. The only thing you can do is hodl. And so, that's not kind of what these crypto people want to hear, because they kind of all want to hear, how they're going to revolutionize this or that, or, how to tie into banking or something. But it's really not. It's not about tying into banking or or tokenization of real world assets. It really isn't about that. It's really about finding a real alternative to this fiat mess that we're in, which is going to be really scary. Like, it's just, you can't underestimate how serious and scary this stuff is. And, I think if you were scared out of your mind with COVID, be prepared to be even more scared out of your mind in the next couple of years, because I just feel like the wheels have come off this engine. The wheels are coming off. Hold on to Bitcoin for dear life, because that might be all you have. You might lose everything else. You might lose your house. You might lose your job. You might, you might have nothing else other than your Bitcoin, right? That's kind of where I think you have to kind of have that mindset. And as much as people think we're back to business as normal, we're not business as normal. Bidenomics has not worked. We're definitely in a sort of a false economy, false narrative of everything's great, right? I know you're going to hear a lot of that on TV. The economy's great, everything's great, but it's only great because we're pushing the gas pedal at full speed, and we're pushing the gas pedal right in the middle of a major recovery, and so yeah, I mean we're we're headed for the wall. I don't know whether the wall is going to be a crash, or is it just going to be things go up. I think things go up in terms of prices. That's kind of my expectation. I think they're gonna talk about this stuff. They're going to explain it away. They're going to come up with some other stats saying that it's not a problem. But I think it's at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, really, who do you believe? Do you believe in the code that tells you 21 million? Or do you believe what this nonsense that these politicians are telling you? I personally only believe the code at this point. I don't trust these politicians. I don't trust any of them. I don't trust the right wing. I don't trust the left wing. And, the idea that they're going to be, having this inflation, I can't even remember the name of it, some kind of anti-inflation act or something. And they're going to come in and they're going to give you credit if you have a new stove or something, or, they're going to stop you they're going to require you to turn in your gas car or anything. It's just, these things are not going to work. They're only going to create more inflation. And, yeah. So, and in some ways, I think you have to kind of embrace it, because that's what gives you Bitcoin, right? That's what's going to give you the asset, the Inflation Reduction Act. Exactly. Crazy idea, right? Like, we're going to spend money to create the Inflation Reduction Act. No, the problem is the problem is you're spending too much money. So the solution to spending too much money is not to spend more money. That's just not the solution. And we're just into this kind of voodoo economics and woke economics and Bidenomics and all this crazy stuff. Again, the only thing that potentially is worse than this is Trumponomics, which make actually no sense either. So, we're in this world of completely fictitious economic thought. These guys are, anybody who has the word economist in their title right now, if they've studied economics, I just have no respect. I just immediately shut off. You have no respect whatsoever, because you're so-called economist. No, you're not. I mean, this is ridiculous. And I do think that, Saifedean made some really great comments in his 3 books, which I have here, which is just to say that all of this stuff is just garbage, right? It's just like, it's a whole theory that's completely wrong. This entire theory of like Keynesian economics, money printing, controlling the money supply to somehow match GDP makes no sense. It's just it's a completely fallacious thing. It's sort of like physics under Aristotle, right? In ancient Greece, right? He had these physics ideas, which were complete nonsense too. Like, an arrow goes to its target because it was destined to go to its target, but no, or things stop because they return to their fundamental position. No, if you throw a ball in space, it goes on forever. Speed does not stop. So a lot of times when they don't understand something, they come up with these theories. Then people keep on repeating the theories, and all of a sudden we're like in the Middle Ages, where people are just telling Galileo that he's a criminal for saying that the Earth is going around the sun, right? Because clearly the sun has to go around the Earth, and everything goes around us because we're the children of God. And so, I feel like we are in the 14th century, the 1400s. We're in the 15th century. We are the Galileos, right? The Bitcoiners, and we're sitting there going, wait, what if we had the finite currency? That would be a good thing. We like that idea. And everybody's saying, no, you can't do that. It's not going to, that won't work. We need credit. We need this. And honestly, they're wrong. I'm 100% sure that they're wrong. And I'm sure that, everybody who's embracing this new world, fundamentally, you understand that we need money that you can't screw around with and you can't print. That's why we're in it. I think obviously we'd love to see, our percentage be worth more, right? We're not completely in it for just the religion of Bitcoin, but I do think we all have somewhat of a view that this world that we grew up in, that we didn't create, that we just inherited, and this fiat world needs to stop. It needs to end. And it's not going to end politically. It's not going to end by electing somebody and by appointing some new head of the Federal Reserve. That's just not going to be how it ends. The only way it ends is if we just sort of say, you know what, we're going to save in Bitcoin. We're going to save in Bitcoin, and we're going to, when we like to do transact and we want to transact, we will potentially transact in Bitcoin too, right? But basically, we're going to personally adopt a Bitcoin standard. And once you personally adopt a Bitcoin standard, as more and more people personally do that, it's uncontrollable. Nobody can stop us from doing that. And so, is that going to be optimal for you over the next 3 months, 6 months? I don't know. It may not. It doesn't matter. But like, you're not going to escape this wave of debasement and inflation by just kind of hiring a professional money manager, getting somebody at Morgan Stanley to manage your money, doing what everybody else is doing, which is investing in bonds and the S&P 500. That stuff's not going to work, and you're gonna end up going into the dust heap like everybody else in these things. And most people are going to be wrong. 99% of this world does not own any Bitcoin right now. 99% does not. Maybe it's 98. Maybe 2% have some form of Bitcoin. But generally speaking, most people do not own Bitcoin. Most people don't think this is significant, including the richest people in the world, including Warren Buffett, including Bill Gates, including Jamie Dimon, right? They are not buying into this. They didn't buy into it. You can make fun of Peter Schiff all you want, but the ones who count are the guys who actually have all the money right now, like Warren Buffett, and they're not Bitcoiners. Bill Gates, not a Bitcoiner. So I think we're going to see a changing of the guard here. I think it's going to happen over the next 10 years. For the most part, it's going to happen over the next 10 years. 10 years from now, I do think we're going to be at $1 million Bitcoin. I do think that this is going to be, I still think people will think it's a Ponzi scheme and everything, but I do think it's more or less going to be accepted that this is now happening. And that's it.